Hi, how you doing?
What a great crowd. Who said democracy is dead? Look at you all showing up. I'm Larry Pratt, CEO of Citizen Media Group, which now owns both Philadelphia Magazine and the Philadelphia Citizen. So welcome to some recognition there. Yes.
That just happened like
So
4 months ago.
Just
You're not
happened
that
a
far
few months
behind.
ago. We'll find out.
You let us.
It's a
You
good thing.
tell us.
That'll be up to you. Again, Larry Pratt.
I'm Roxanne Patel Shepalavi. I'm executive editor and editorial director of Citizen Media Group. Again, the Philadelphia Citizen and Philadelphia Magazine. It's true.
So, what's your name, ma'am? Penny. Penny Scott. So, Penny, thank you for the question. Was it a good thing? The reason we did this, and we're in our fourth month of taking this storied legacy publication and remaking it for modern times and modern challenges, is because we're interested and indeed committed to increasing or bettering the conversation in Philadelphia, to defibrillating democracy in the American city where it was born, and that's 250 years ago this very year, as you well know. So part of that has always been part of the mission of the Citizen, which is to through thought leadership events like this, and I want to plug a few of them for you in a minute, but also through solutions journalism to get people focused on letting go of complaint and instead focusing on what we can do together, as the video described, to make our city better, to take our city back. And so Philly Mag has this long, storied history of great writing, great storytelling, and service, lifestyle service. As our new editor, Christy Spear-Lejeune, says, it should be the ultimate guide to how to live the good life in Philadelphia. So both of these brands come under the rubric of how to live well, that's the Philly Mag side, and how to do good, that's the Citizen side. And we're here tonight to celebrate both living well and doing good. So thank you all for coming out.
And you can find all this great work here on stages, but also at phillymag.com, at the philadelphiacitizen.org. And of course, I think a lot of you picked up magazines out there. You can subscribe to the magazine, where you'll see a lot of changes pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll have a totally redesigned magazine in June, redesigned new looking websites for both. But please subscribe, because we need it. Both are nonprofits now, because we put the city and region first. So with that, let's get to tonight's show.
So first, I want to thank a couple of sponsors and partners. 6ABC, which is here live streaming this on its website. Thank you. Landfest Foundation's Every Voice, Every Vote, Wisvis Bank, Darko Capital Campus Apartments, and Fittler Club. Please give a round of applause to everybody here at Fittler, who has made everything so beautiful tonight.
I also want to add a thank you to our candidates tonight. You know, I'm often given a lot of shit to political office holders. I had a member of city council say to me, "Why does it always sound like when I read you, you're screaming at me?" And
Stop writing in capital letters.
well, it's it's actually a form of love. Love for the city and belief in accountability, and in civility. But I do want to say that and I've said this every time we do this. This is the third time we've done an ultimate job interview. And again, the idea is this isn't a forum. This isn't a debate. It's a job interview. We're hiring a congressperson tonight, someone to represent you. So let's treat it as a traditional job interview. And I really want to give a shout out to all three of them for taking the chance to do an unproven or embryonic format like this, but also just for their service, for being, as Teddy Roosevelt used to say, in the arena. So can we hear it for people who's... people who seek to put up with the second guessing of jerks like me. And let me just plug a few of our events, and then we'll get to the main event. On Tuesday, April 7th, I hope you can join us right back here for the Natural Allies Clean Energy Solution Program with former Mayor Michael Nutter, former Auditor General Eugene DePasquale, and Ali Perlman, CEO of Build Philly Now. That's next week here in the ballroom, Tuesday, April 7th at 5:30. Also, some of you might have seen the really groundbreaking new book by Richard Vague. It's about the forgotten founder of the American Revolution, the financier of the American Revolution. So he will be here at Fitler Club in conversation with Philadelphia Magazine editor Christy Spear-Lejeune on April 14th, and you're invited to that. And finally, there's our Citizen of the Year Awards Gala, also in this very room. I like to call it the ESPYs of civic engagement. Last year, some of you might have recognized that, there's our winners. Last year, we honored Jalen Hurts, not because he won a Super Bowl, but because of all he does off the field.
But also, he won a Super Bowl.
And this year, we're honoring people like Dr. Paul Offit of CHOP, who is speaking truth to Kennedy. Yep. Jane
You can read
Golden.
about him in the magazine.
Yeah, he's on the cover of the new issue of Philly Mag when there are issues around here for you to pick up. Disruptors, Carl June and Jeff Marazzo, and most importantly, not most importantly, but most noticeably, John and Lee Middleton, the owners of the Phillies. Again, not for what their team does, but for what they do for the community every single day.
But also, go Phillies.
And you can find information about all of these events at thephiladelphiacitizen.org/events.
So back to tonight. I just wanted to throw one other thing out there. We're going to, just to explain the format, we're going to hear from each of the candidates for about 20 minutes. Then we'll bring them back on stage to answer audience questions. To that end, we've distributed, and hopefully you guys picked up cards in which you can write any questions. We will come around and pick them up in between candidates. Please keep your questions to the sort of conceit of this. These are job interview questions. So we're not asking questions about issues or policy. It's really about character, experience, why they think they are the people who are suited to do this job.
Well, let's get this party started. Who wants to hire a congressperson? We will cede the stage to 6ABC's Matt O'Donnell, who, by the way, secret fan of Ron Burgundy. And he can
not so secret anymore.
He can explain that if he chooses or not. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm kind of a big deal. People know me. Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Roxanne. Thanks for inviting me. And I don't know how you guys did. You got out of the house on a Tuesday night. Congratulations to you. This is fantastic. I would like to introduce my fellow inquisitors. Maggy Wilkinson, CEO of Athena Global Advisors. And Marcel Pratt, managing partner at Ballard Spahr and former Philadelphia City Solicitor. We have too many microphones. I'm going to put one down. All right, let's get our program underway. Thanks, Maggie. Thank you, Marcel. First, introducing Dr. Ayla Stanford. She is COVID hero, as it were. Dr. Stanford, please approach the stage. She is a pediatric surgeon and founder of the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium, former director of the Mid-Atlantic region of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and running for the 3rd Congressional District in Philadelphia and other parts nearby. Dr. Stanford, great to see you. You are an author. You have your book there, I see. She told me she wanted to bring it to remember to mention it. But at first, I want to talk to you about your main profession, which is being a doctor. The 119th Congress, which is in Washington right now, includes 20 physicians. You, as a pediatric surgeon, obviously would become the 21st. How might a doctor handle this job, which involves a lot of non-doctor things, such as national debt, taxation, protecting consumers, and acting as a check on the White House? How might a doctor do this differently, better, or worse?
So, great question. The difference with a physician and politicians is everything is predicated on trust. Your relationship with your doctor, how your doctor is able to ascertain what your symptoms are, what you may be feeling, and what you share with that individual is trust. It's a trust relationship. And so what I bring to start as I represent the 3rd Congressional District is listening. And so the policy that I will bring forth, the legislation that I will champion, is because individuals have told me what they needed. It's because I have a finger on the pulse of what happens from Northwest to South Philly to everything in between. And you mentioned taxation. What were the other? Just because I'm not writing down.
I mean, I'm just mentioning like
Just mentioning all the
random things that
So,
you'll be dealing with.
if I may. So one is obviously you need to be a legislator. That's what everyone likes to talk about. But I should mention, as a congresswoman, you don't just legislate and pass bills. You also need to lead, and you also need to bring funds back to your community. And I have to throw this out there because you mentioned COVID. Passing a bill is not what saved us during the world's worst pandemic. And so your scope of work and your expertise can't just be coming together with a bill, getting your subject matter experts, the legal experts, voting in the House, going before the committee, voting before the Senate, and having it signed by the president, which is the steps. But I have to say, for the candidate who has been in school for 18 years after high school, that I am an expert in learning, and I have no problem ascertaining that information. The other parts, though, leadership. It's, for me, leading without a title. It's doing the right thing when no one is watching. It's taking a chance, a bold move, courage, when you realize no one is coming to help people you deeply care about. And I will remind many, and this goes beyond COVID and before that I am and was a private citizen who was not elected. It was not my responsibility. This is a job interview. It was not my job. But after I reached out to many whose job it was and realized there was no solution, there was no vision, there was no drive, I did not know how we were going to come to a solution, but I knew I wouldn't stop until I got to it. As a surgeon, we are detail-oriented. We are the specialties that everyone calls when you can't find a solution to the problem. And so you don't stop unless the patient isn't breathing. And even then, you take care of the family. And so for me, this is not about a promotion. It's about the change that is needed. We've been doing things the same way for so long with the same institutions and the same machines. And when we needed that the most, it was not there. And I filled a gap, not with the institution of the state, the city, or the federal government. I filled a gap as a kid that was born in North Philly on public assistance to a teenage mom that needed SNAP benefits, Title I funding, ironed my sheets in the wintertime because we didn't have heat. This person that went away to school for 18 years and as soon as I was done came to North Philly to take care of the community that made me. And so what you need is trust. You need a fearless leader. You need someone who is learned and who learns quickly. And you need someone who can build coalitions. And I almost forgot, from that grassroots work, I was appointed by President Biden, and I do have federal leadership experience, not from 20 years ago, but 3 years ago. And so many of those congressional leaders and former secretaries of health have all been guiding me along this process. And they were the ones who called me and said, Dr. Ayla, it's time. You have the story, you have the trust, you have the experience, and you have the support, and it's time. And so that's why. And that's what makes me qualified to handle housing, taxation, crime, the environment, certainly healthcare. But I'm going to make a point not to talk about it. For anyone who says that's all she knows, we got about 15 more minutes to show you the other things.
Let's get on with it.
Okay.
Marcel and Maggie have questions as well.
Doctor, it's very good to see you. You said earlier that the job is much bigger than just legislating, and I agree, but legislating is still very important to the job. And I want to get a sense of your creativity when it comes to legislation. So if you had a magic wand and you could pass any law tomorrow, what would it be and why? And also, if you could repeal any law, what would it be and why?
Well, repeal any law would definitely be taking away the woman's right to choose. That would be first and foremost. And if I could revise anything, and you know I got to revise that Affordable Care Act, we got to get to universal health care, but right now, it has to be what's happening in the Middle East. It has to be this war that is unconstitutional, that is illegal, that is putting too many of our loved ones in harm's way when we don't even know why we are there. That also took money out of our TSA folks' mouths to feed their families. And it's just utter and complete chaos. And so what the bill would be is legislation. And I should say they are making progress by not funding the war. And that's a step in the right direction. But for me, it would be to get some cessation so there isn't more lives lost. Today in class with my students at Penn, one brought up that our debt is at $39 trillion, which is the highest it's been since 2000 something. And so we are spending upwards of $1.4 billion a day on a war that is unconstitutional. You know how many children we could feed school lunches, how much education we could pay for, all the food deserts across the United States. I've counted 6,500, and at $5 million, how many we could take care of, the nonviolent crimes and people who are incarcerated that we could invest in vocational skills, that we could get clean water and energy. I mean, there's so much that we could do. So for me, what it would be immediately to overturn would be giving back the rights to women and pregnant people, the choice. And the second would be getting out of this war.
Thank you.
Doctor, thank you for being here. I'm going to turn the conversation a little bit and ask more of a personal question, just because I love when I interview people to get to know them a little bit better as people. So I'd love to know, it's a simple question, but it's two-part. What gets you up every day? And then when you go to sleep at night, what keeps you up? What do you think about?
Okay, Maggie, come on. What gets me up in the morning and what keeps me up at night? What gets me up in the morning is, well, there are many things, but I'm going to focus on right now. In 2013, after doing the Broad Street Run in the healthiest shape of my life, I had a standard procedure. I went in and had a complication. And I was septic. I required emergency surgery. And I almost died. And I think back of if I hadn't been training for the Broad Street Run, there's no way I would have survived. And I remember being in the ICU, listening to the beep, 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 like, and knowing how sick and how close I was to not surviving. And when I got home, and I remember my chair of the hospital saying, because it was a surgical complication, I was mad at myself because I should have advocated stronger instead of entrusting everything, and it could have been prevented. And I remember the chief saying to me, sometimes bad things happen to good people. And I thought, really? And it changed the way I practice medicine. I think I was always an empath, but I never once after that said, it'll just be a quick procedure, you'll be in and out. I really took time with the informed consent, and I made sure my patients were aware. So it changed the way. And when God spared my life, I promised that I would never be fearful of anything again. That if I thought about it, I was going to go after it. That I was going to have my group, my cabinet around me to guide me, but that the decision would be mine. And that is how I live my life now, with no regret. And so that's the what gets me up. What keeps me up lately, I'm sure you can imagine, is thinking of responses to questions that I've heard on the trail and how I would have answered it differently. And damn it, I should have said that. And it's crazy because it wakes me up and I will stop. It'll be pitch black and I'll start writing something down and go back to sleep. But the other thing, honestly, I have 3 sons. I have three black boys. I, love my babies. I have one who is they, them. I have one who is on the autism spectrum, and I have one who is way too popular that girls like way too much. And so I worry because, my one son was wrongly arrested, and someone sat in a police car and said, "That's him." And they put him in the back of a car and they handcuffed him. And prior to that, he stood on the sidewalk at Dick's while all his friends walked by and saw him. And I thought to myself, I was so angry. And the police called me and said, "Oh, you don't have to come. We looked at the surveillance. It's not him." I said, "Oh, hell no. I'm on my way." But at the same time, I was grateful that what we had taught him, that he didn't run because I watched the body cam footage later, he didn't run when they tapped him on the shoulder, he didn't jerk, and I think of how much we need in the way of, policing and teaching and education and not wanting my child to be a statistic. So for me, what keeps me up is my children, just having the opportunity. And what keeps me going and gets me up is I know I had a second chance on my life, and I will never forget that.
I'm going to bet that I wake up earlier than you. Is that true?
When I wake up, what time?
2:50 a.m.
Oh, okay.
Got you.
Well, for what it's worth, as a surgeon, I usually stay up for 36 hours at a time, so I don't go to sleep.
You got me. Hypothetical scenario, Dr. Stanford. Let's say you're elected Congresswoman, and during your term, President Trump, for whatever reason, wants to see the Pennsylvania Congressional delegation at the White House. Some kind of bill he wants passed. And he needs support, and he's reaching across the aisle. And you have a moment with him. What do you say to President Trump?
I would start with, what keeps you up at night? And what gets you up in the morning? I would honestly have compiled a list of all the things that he has done in his term to negatively impact Americans. I would tell him that the things he promised to lower the cost of food and gas and healthcare and opportunity, that he lied to the American people, and many people voted for him because of what he promised. I would say you have an obligation to the American people. There are children who look up to you. What do you want your legacy to be? And I would also give him some health advice, because the 4 times the dose of aspirin he's taking is going to shut down his kidneys, and he's going to need dialysis soon. But in terms of them coming to, you said coming to visit, I would talk to the governor first, and see what he felt. Did he believe that, presuming it's Governor Shapiro, did he believe that a visit to the White House would be beneficial for what we are trying to accomplish in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania? I would meet with the other congressional leaders to see what they thought. I don't believe that I would say no, though, because ultimately we have a legislative branch, we have an executive branch, and we have a judicial branch. And right now, the executive branch has been doing whatever it wants. The legislative branch has been so divisive that they are actually ineffective. And the judicial branch, recently when 47 brought forth his tariffs and so forth, and the judicial branch voted it down, but literally within a few hours, he introduced another order that now he has 150 days to introduce taxes. And I thought sometime, and I read the Constitution, can't they remove him? However, the U.S. Marshals control, the judicial branch controls the U.S. Marshals, but ultimately they report to the DOJ, and the DOJ reports to the president. So even if they tried to do something, he could squash all of it. And so if he's what we got to find some common ground. And so I would not say no. I would not do it publicly. And I would ask, of course, Governor Shapiro, and for us to collectively come together as a legislator, as congressional leaders with the governor and with the president.
Marcel, Maggie, you have a couple of rapid fires we can do. We have about 90 seconds.
Sure. There's a very old saying that the person who pays the piper calls the tune. And that applies in a variety of contexts, including politics.
Sure.
Could you tell us who your biggest donors are and why?
So my biggest donors, and many of you have seen them because I have many commercials on television telling you why you should vote for me, are 314 Action Fund. And 314 Action Fund is committed to electing doctors and scientists because they recognize that this is an anti-science administration and that healthcare is under is under attack. But in addition to them, also the American College of Surgeons, for which I've been a member for over 20 years, the American Association of Osteopathic Medicine. I am not a career politician, I am a physician. And so most of the people who support me are doctors because that's my tribe. And I will say that there is no money that I will accept that does not agree and align with my policy and does not support my constituents. I got a check, I'll tell you, from a nursing home, and I found out later that they had been indicted for Medicare fraud. I sent that check back quickly and confirmed with compliance that it had been cashed. And so that is who I am. And I have to just not that I have to remind you that it was not my job, but I saw that our city was hurting and needed real leadership. And I stepped in. It wasn't for fame. It wasn't for a picture. It wasn't for a promotion. It was because I knew I had a skill set that would impact lives in the moment and beyond. And that's what I want people to think about when they go to the polls to cast their votes. Leadership when no one is watching, and it's not for the photo op, it's because it's the right thing to do.
Dr. Ayla Stanford, thank you. And don't go far, we'll have Q&A from the audience for you. So we'll be seeing you soon. Thanks. Next up, Pennsylvania State Representative Chris Rabb. I haven't seen you yet, so welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you. Representative Rabb is a 5-term representative from Pennsylvania's 200th District. And since we're talking about books, he is the author of the book, Invisible Capital, How Unseen Forces Shape Entrepreneurial Opportunity. And he has it with him as well.
I thought I'd read a couple chapters.
We have your microphone right there if you would be able to take that up. And Maggie has your first question.
Hi, thank you for being here. It's nice to meet you. Tell me about a time that you had to completely reinvent yourself, where you were at a crossroads and you had to start over, and how you did that, and tell us about it.
Well, wow, that's a really good question. I wasn't prepared for that, but I guess I would say when I went from being Chris Rabb to Rep Rabb. I have 70,000 bosses across 4 neighborhoods in Northwest Philadelphia. And when I took office, I became a public figure, and I am an introvert. I am an outgoing introvert. So I'm outgoing, but I don't like to go out. Does that make sense? So my new job was catering to 70,000 new bosses. So as soon as I left the house, I was on. I couldn't speed, I couldn't curse, I couldn't litter, and I love to litter. But I'm told it's not good anymore. You shouldn't litter. I should have said that. Okay. So I had to find another part of myself that was still authentic and share that with people so that I felt like people could access me but still hold on to something. And I was able to do that by adopting a moniker that young people in my district coined for me, which was Rep Rabb. It's one word, Rep Rabb. If anyone calls me Rep Rabb, it means they've met me. And the Rep Rabb persona is a part of who I am, but it's me showing up as a public servant. And that's really important to me. Because one of the reasons I ran was because I was tired of politicians. They pander, they're inauthentic, they're corrupt, they're lazy, they're aggressively mediocre. Like, I don't care for that. So I wanted to be something different, and as Rep Rabb, I was the fun-loving, quirky, neurospicy, sometimes controversial person who was accessible to people because I didn't have that experience with a lot of elected officials who I engaged, and I wanted to meet people where they were. And as a result, my personality shone through that persona, but it is as Rep Rabb. And the other piece that is, kind of challenging to say because it's hard, but I'll say it. When people come to me as an elected official, they're not coming to talk to Chris Rabb. They're talking to the person in power for a specific reason because I am in that seat. I'm in that position. If I were just regular Chris Rabb, they would walk right by me. So I would find that some people who didn't know me would say, "Hey, Chris," and I'm like, "I don't know you like that. I'm Representative Rabb, or you can call me Rep Rabb, but this Chris business, I don't care for. I find it disrespectful." And I learned that from my father because my father was a physician. He desegregated the University of Lowell Medical School in 1950 or 1954. And when he became a physician, people would call him by his first name, and it would drive him crazy because it reminded him of his father, who was a country doctor from Mississippi. And what you would be called if you were a black doctor in Jim Crow America is boy. So he had to grow up watching his dad, who was a civil rights activist, a healer, being called boy by illiterate white teenagers. And his father couldn't do anything. He couldn't change his facial expression. He couldn't curse. He couldn't gesture, because if he did, he could be lynched. And my father carried that forward. So I joke that I didn't know my father had a first name until I was a teenager. Thought he was Dr. Rabb. So the Rabb, how I reinvented myself, part of that is when I show up as a public servant, I'm Rabb. And what that means is I'm accessible, but I take my job really seriously.
Thank you.
Representative, a very important aspect of this job is legislating. I know it's much bigger than that, but at its core, that's what the job involves. And I want to get a sense of your legislative creativity. So if you
Oh, no. Oh.
So if you could pass one law tomorrow
Oh.
that doesn't exist currently, what would it be and why? And also, if you could repeal one law, what would it be and why?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'm just thinking about all the things I've already done. I thought you were going to mention my vasectomy bill, but that's not what I'm going to say. I really thought that's where you were going, huh? All right, so I had a bill. Texas passed a law, to basically ban abortion. And I wanted to show up as a cisgender man to push back on that without centering myself in a struggle that is largely focused on gender inequality and misogyny and sexism. So I said, well, you know what? I got a vasectomy in 2008. I never once thought about what the government would think about my personal decision. So I circulated a legislative proposal that would mandate that all inseminators, that's you, men, get a vasectomy within 6 weeks of their 40th birthday or 6 weeks after siring their third child. Oddly enough, I got some pushback, because I find that a lot of men, close your ears, men, are very humorless when it comes to their testicles. And many women seem to appreciate it, because I was making the point that there is a huge double standard. We can regulate freely the bodily autonomy of women and girls. Never discussion with regard to men and boys. And it's that type of creativity that I try to bring, that kind of irreverence. And so going to your question, if I could repeal, I would say, repeal the death penalty. It's a bill I have right now in Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Low-hanging fruit. Death penalty, is born out of lynching. That's its origins. And you can see the statistics based on the race of the victim, which is a story of America itself. So that's off the top of my head. One thing I would, a new law, there's so many. I would say, let's just take money out of politics. How about that? I mean, duh.
Given your sense of humor, I think I need to pick up your book. So there's that. I mean, I could only imagine what's in those pages, other than some entrepreneurial stuff.
Well, in the first page of the book, I mentioned Donald Trump, and it was published in 2010.
Okay.
And my editor said, "You're coming at this guy pretty hard. Are you sure you want to do that?" This 2010, and I said, "I want to write a whole chapter on this evil guy." And they're like, "Yeah, we'll keep what you have in there."
Okay. I'm going to throw out a couple more names for you. But first, you are a progressive Democrat. You like to tell people that you go against your party when you believe it is necessary. I've read that some people call you Philadelphia's Iran Mamdani, and if you win the congressional seat, you'll be Philadelphia's AOC. So what do you think about that?
I'm older than both of them, perhaps combined. So, no, I'm my own person. This is not like the things that make me the progressive firebrand right now are things that I've been saying consistently, not just in my 10 years in office, but I have public opinions and have written and protested and done things long before I even considered this fever dream of running for Congress. So now things are catching up to me, because when I took office, I introduced an anti-ICE bill. It got very little movement from my Democratic colleagues. I'm not an immigrant. I don't descend from immigrants. My people were enslaved. They did not choose to come here. I don't even represent a large population of foreign-born constituents. I did it because these are our neighbors, right? I mean, like, right is right, right? I didn't need to take a poll and say, well, maybe one day I'm gonna run for higher office and I should play it safe. No, I did it because it was the right thing to do. And listen, when we think that we are safe because that's happened to other people, we are lured into a false sense of security. I don't have to be Latino to understand that ICE is evil. And the other thing is, I'm a genealogy nerd, so buckle up. When I thought about what ICE was doing to my neighbors, I thought about my great-great-great-grandparents, Hiram and Juliet Wheeler in Mansfield, Ohio. They were conductors in the Underground Railroad. They were ensconced in their community. When the passage of the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law happened, they were scared as hell, because that law basically deputized certain white men to rip apart families. Does that sound familiar? And they not just rip them apart, but sell them into slavery. And none of that black family of mine were enslaved. They were in Ohio. So they had to leave their country of origin to flee to Canada. So the first event that I went to after I took office, I held up a picture of one of my ancestors. And I talked about how my black enslaved ancestors are connected to the current atrocities and injustices that are happening to people who may not be African American. They're still our neighbors. And they're human beings. Of course they're human beings, and there's no hierarchy for human rights. So right is right. So I did that. No one else was doing it, and that's actually why I ran for office. Have you ever said, oh man, why are all these knuckleheads running? Why can't we have a good person? There's plenty of good people, but have you ever looked in the mirror and said, maybe that's me? That's what happened to me. I had no interest in running for higher office. I worked on Capitol Hill during Newt Gingrich era, okay? So I was like, no, thank you. I saw how the sausage was made. I'm like, I'm good. But something happened along the way where I said, you know what, it's easy to critique, but you got to be a part of the solution. I said, you know what, maybe I could be a good state rep. I don't know. I'll figure it out along the way if I get elected. And I wasn't supposed to have been elected. Everyone said, you can't win. And I said, well, of course I can't win if I don't run. And they said, no, you don't understand. They already have someone for that seat. And I said, well, who's they? Well, you know, the people in power. I said, but that's the voters, I thought, and that's what elections are for. So I ran, and to my great surprise, I won 10 years ago. And I haven't looked back, and I'm accountable to the people, and that really matters because we don't have enough public servants in office, and we have too many damn politicians. And just to be clear, because this is not like a slogan, I want to define it. I want to define the difference because it's important. It's not semantic to me because I know the difference between a public servant and a politician. Can I just tell you very briefly? When I got to Harrisburg, I met some of my colleagues, Democrat and Republican. And they said, oh, hi, welcome to the legislature. How are you? Good, good. So, like, what are you hiding? What's going on here? Yeah, what you need to do once you need to do this and then watch out for that and so forth. I'm like, it was very kind of shady, like, hey, you're one of us, old boys network situation. That was the politician response to me showing up. The public servants who I met were like, hi, tell me what inspired you to run. What issues do you care about? What kind of people do you represent? What's your constituency? What's your background? How do you want to make the world a better place? Those were the public servants. And those were the folks who I've hung out with for a decade.
So if you ended up in Washington,
Oh, no, you mean when I? Okay, go ahead.
would you be able to handle being in a more junior role to start? Because you would be brand new, and so you would not be running in charge of committees out of the gate. So how would you?
I'm not a chair of a committee now, so that's fine. I was in the minority.
How would you effectuate change? How would you be able to get things done?
The way I've gotten things done for the past 10 years. So this is where I brag. So I'm a radical, fire-breathing, progressive, black guy, Democrat from Philly. That's like 5 strikes against me, right? That's not a great bunch of things to take to Harrisburg where good ideas go to be tortured, right? But I was able to get things done while in the Democratic minority over my first 6 years. And please don't tell my mother this, but I didn't need to have my name assigned to the bills that I got enacted into law. I worked with people who came from radically different backgrounds than me, and I met them where they were. So generally speaking, this was the approach. Hey, what do you think about the Earth? I feel that the Earth is flat. I would no longer talk about the Earth, but we would talk about genealogy or tennis or whatever, and then we would find something that was legislative in nature. Say, oh, I don't believe that the government has the moral authority to kill people. That was a conversation, and this very conservative Republican said, I agree with you. And I said, say what now? He goes, oh, I'm pro-life. I'm like, all the way through? He's like, yeah. I said, no caveats? He said, no, all the way through. I said, do you want to work on this repeal the death bill together? He's like, yes. We worked on that bill for 4 years. And we bragged about how different we were. And it freaked out journalists and constituents and some of our colleagues because we were thick as thieves on that one issue. And we never talked about anything else, not even the weather. And that's how I was able to get things done. And I'm proud of that because I met people where they were. I didn't assume that because they didn't have my worldview that they were evil or less than. I just met them where they were with authenticity, and you'll be shocked to hear this, a little humor.
Marcel, you have a question? We have about 3 minutes left.
Yeah, sure. So earlier you mentioned taking the money out of politics, and you might have heard the saying that the person who pays the piper calls the tune. So could you tell us who are your biggest donors, and why do you think they're your biggest donors?
I knew that gotcha question was going to come up. And look, if you can't vote for me for saying this, I will understand. My biggest donor is my mommy. My mommy. I don't take corporate PAC money. Okay. If you like that fact, you should be more impressed with what I'm about to say. In Harrisburg, where there are no campaign contribution limits and no restrictions on lobbying, where a lobbyist could literally buy me a summer house, I have never taken a dime of corporate PAC money in the previous 10 years. And that's more impressive because in Congress, you can only get $3,500, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't take corporate PAC money. I also oppose billionaire-backed super PACs that are funding, that are participating in this very race. And that hurts our democracy, and it also makes people cynical because if you say you're for universal health care, right? And in fact, we all of us who are going to be on the stage say we're for universal health care. But how do you know which one is actually committed to it if one or more of the opponents are taking money from the very entities that are trying to kill Medicare for all? So I heard you mention 314 Action that was mentioned previously. Just do your research. 314 Action has also endorsed other Democratic physicians who are currently in Congress. Every single Democratic physician in Congress who is endorsed by that PAC, not a single one of them has signed on to the Medicare for All bill. I would absolutely be a co-sponsor of that bill. I'm looking forward to a very relevant endorsement in the coming days. And I think that matters. And it's important that we, the electorate, know how this money is connected and what that influence is so we can make informed decisions.
Pennsylvania State Representative Chris Rabb. Thank you. Don't go away. We have audience questions, but you may leave the stage. Our final candidate for this evening before our Q&A, and by the way, thank you all for your questions. Really appreciate them. We'll get to them in a moment. State Senator Sharif Street. He is a 3-term state senator from Pennsylvania's 3rd District, former chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, and of course, son of the former Philadelphia Mayor John Street. Thank you, Senator Street. Marcel, Pratt has your first question.
Senator, good to see you. Might want to grab your microphone. So we'd like to get a sense of your legislative creativity and what's important to you. So imagine you had a magic wand and tomorrow you could pass any law that doesn't exist. What would it be and why? And also, if you could repeal any law that currently exists, what would it be and why?
So I have a magic wand, and I can pass any law that doesn't exist. What law would it be and why? That's interesting. You just wiped away the whole legislative process thing. Look, I think that I think I would eradicate the challenges that folks have faced around redlining and access to capital. Small businesses create 85 to 90% of all the new jobs. And the folks, and there are so many people that I meet in North Philly and West Philly, Germantown, South Philly, who are interested in being able to have their own business. But they just functionally can't access capital. And there are so many challenges associated with that. There are challenges around discrimination around race, gender. There are challenges around where they want to locate their businesses and the fact that those areas are deemed either the appraisal values are low or the insurance prices are high. And so I think removing the access to capital to allow people to start their businesses. For some people, starting a bakery and having it be successful is not only life-altering for them, but it becomes a legacy that they pass on to their family. Other people, it's an auto garage. There's an auto shop on 30th and Dolphin where that auto shop and that family has run it now for a couple generations. As a matter of fact, the father who originally started, now his sons have 2 other auto shops. And it is the staple of that community. And it has stabilized that family for generations. So I think eliminating the barriers to access to capital.
Senator Street, you were the chairman of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party during the 2024 election. You've resigned that so that you can run for Congress. You had a good day in many ways during the 2024 election, Democrats getting elected in the state. However, the biggie, President Trump won the state of Pennsylvania and its electoral votes, defeating Kamala Harris eventually in the election. Why did that happen, and what would you have done differently if you could go back?
Well, look, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. At the state level in Pennsylvania, we've been focusing on issues related to people's quality of life. We've been focusing on, and our state legislative candidates continue to do that. We focused on the fact that we were investing to drop crime. We're focused on, we were making investments to help create jobs. We focused on actual tangible quality of life issues. At the national level, a decision was made by either the DNC or the Biden campaign, then the Harris campaign, to focus on value propositions alone, to focus on democracy, to focus on choice, as opposed to focusing on bread and butter issues. In Pennsylvania, we had made tremendous strides focusing on bread and butter issues. And we wanted to continue to do that. So, for instance, I took over as vice chair. We were only 16 out of 50 senators. We're down. We're now only 2 away from flipping it, and we were down over 24 seats in the House. We flipped the House. During that cycle, we didn't lose a single state rep seat. We didn't lose any state senators, and we actually end up in a special election immediately following, increased the number of state legislators, state senators. But there was the same voters on the same day who voted for Democrats in the state legislative races where we were focused on actually improving the quality of people's lives, voted against Democrats at the federal level, and that was across the state. We won Frank Burns' seat, in a seat that Trump won by doubled. He won by like 20 points, but we still won Democratic legislative seats. We won seats in our surrounding counties at the legislative level that Trump won, or else we wouldn't have been able to hold the chambers. But the reality is people wanted to hear what we were going to deliver for them. I think that people don't like Trump's bigotry, but for too many Pennsylvanians, it wasn't a deal breaker. It was like, I don't like it. I prefer he not be that way. But if he is going to make an argument about my quality of life, I'm willing to accept that. And I think that was something that we recognized at the state level, but at the national level, they just didn't get it.
I'd like to ask you a question, Senator Street, that is more about how you think and who you are. So if you would you tell me what it is that gets you up in the morning and then what it is that keeps you up at night?
So I live in the neighborhood I've always lived in North Philadelphia. And in that neighborhood, there is an urgency to our getting things done. So when we talk about gun violence, for us, it's a lot more real than it seems. It's theoretical for some folks. Almost every member of my staff has lost someone to gun violence. As most people know, on July 4th, 2021, we lost a lot of the gun violence in a mass shooting on 60th Street. So when we talk about making investments in gun violence, that I know that there will be people who live or die based on the fact that there may be 2 young people who are beefing, and if no one's there to teach them conflict resolution skills, someone could die. And it is the immediacy of it. It's the same thing with food insecurity. There are people who will not eat, and I see them as I walk in and out of my house. So there's an urgency, and I think that is part of why in my legislative history I am unwilling to simply say we will only legislate when we get to the point that we take majorities, and we're not going to actually try and get things done now. Barack Obama called it the fierce urgency of now. I call it looking at the faces of people who have to deal with the problems today. And so while I'm certainly aspirational about things, when we passed the Pennsylvania penny, the Obamacare, I was living in a neighborhood where people didn't have access to health care, and now they have health care, so they can see a doctor. Is it perfect? No. But it's a lot better for those 500,000 Pennsylvanians that have health care than if they did not.
And what keeps you up?
What keeps me up is the concern that we won't be good enough, that we will fail, that someone will call about a problem and we won't be able to solve it. And I have to look that person in the eye and recognize that they have a problem that we're unable to solve, and it will have life-altering consequences for them. There are people who call me and say, I have a child who I think was wrongly convicted of a crime, and they're facing life in prison. Can you get them out tomorrow? And the answer is usually, I don't know of a way to do that tomorrow for your child. I am happy for the folks who were working on for felony murder, who were talking about how there are 1,500 of them statewide, people who did not actually take someone's life, who are facing life without the possibility of parole. We began litigation. I've had people come to me crying about it. Fortunately, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just ordered that our bill, Senate Bill 387 or something similar to it, needs to be passed to create eligibility for these folks. But I've had to look at and talk with families for like 8-9 years, and without being able to give them the immediate relief that they were seeking. And so having to talk to those folks, and I won't have to see them on the way home because I live at 16th and Lehigh, and they'll be waiting and they'll have concerns. And so it's the idea that we may fail them.
And I want to stick with that theme about what your constituents may want. So in preparation for this event, the Philadelphia Citizen asked Philadelphians to create a job description, and they came up with some very thoughtful, insightful things. And one of the elements of a great congressperson that stood out to me that Philadelphians identified was the quote, the ability to make mistakes and ask for help. And I think that's a recognition that no one is perfect and that even our leaders need to know when to ask for help. So could you give us an example of maybe when you've made a mistake and you've had to ask for help?
So I will see. So I want to have to ask for help a lot. I will say that both Senators Vincent Hughes and Tony Williams have been incredibly helpful to me in my growth as a member, and they've been there a lot longer. But I think that there are times when we're looking at how we're going to approach a budgetary issue and how we're going to figure out. Like, I wanted to get. I'll tell you, when I first got to the Senate, I wanted to get money. I was concerned. This is going to sound kind of wonky, but it was a big deal to me. So the city had just introduced legislation about the AVI, and we're doing all. And I recognized that if we did not make changes, that the city's increasing the value of its real estate portfolio was going to cost the school district $180 million immediately. And I was scheduled to have a press conference about all of this and move forward with it. And I talked to Tony and Vince, and they both said, we don't think you should do that. If you do that, the Senate Republicans will not make the changes that you want. I said, you should need to cancel your press conference. So what we need to do is put an amendment into the school code that will stop it, because you did a good job citing the problem. But if you have a press conference, the Senate Republicans are not going to agree to a public recognition that where they could snatch that money from the school district. So we canceled the press conference. We moved forward, and we're able to. And they got rid of my bill, scrapped my bill, did an amendment into the school code, and saved the school district $180 million. The response to my colleagues was, "Do you care more about the actual?" And they said, "Do you care more about getting this done or getting the press clip on it?" And ultimately, for me, it was about getting it done. But scheduling the press conference was the mistake. Now, I hadn't said what the press conference was about, so the damage wasn't permanent. But had I done that, it would have undermined my ability to actually get the school district what it needed in the budget process.
Senator, when you have a father who spent 8 years as mayor of Philadelphia, it's hard to fall out of his shadow. So I would like to ask you about your dad.
Really?
If you spend 8 years as mayor or as any chief executive, you will have a complicated legacy. It's almost guaranteed. Mayor Street kept Philadelphia solvent, balanced the budget, controlled spending, cleaned up city neighborhoods, and turned the attention away from Center City, which was absorbing a lot of it. But also there was the corruption conviction of Corey Kemp, who was appointed by your father. There was that listening device that was found in the mayor's office. What did you learn from your dad's time as mayor of Philadelphia?
Wow, I learned a lot, and he had a 28-year public career. But I would say a few things. One, there were people have been surveilling us for most of my life. The first time we found a listening device on us was during AppScan when I was 6 years old. So we have been being surveilled almost my entire life. So it was new that there was a public release and talk about us, but we have been the constant subjects of surveillance my entire life. Two, I found out that as an adult that I would be listed in documents and I would be a subject of a public investigation as well. And so I understood. And then three, I found out that there would be the politicization of the prosecutorial process was real because that information was released in the October right before the general election, when they could have released it at any time, but they did it at that point. But moreover, I found out that you have to be not just not corrupt, but not corruptible. I don't think that Corey Kemp necessarily set out to be corrupted, but because he was not being vigilant enough about making sure that he could not be corrupted, he ended up in that space. I knew Corey pretty well. I don't think he was prepared for what he was getting into. And ultimately, you have to, be careful about this stuff and be careful in how you conduct yourself. When I'm working, I'm working. I don't go and fly around and live a lavish lifestyle that is beyond my means. So you make a decision to be a public servant. You have to be prepared to live within the means that your lifestyle, that salary will afford you. My salary affords me pretty well at 16th and Lehigh. But in all seriousness, I don't live a life. When people start trying to live a life that is well beyond the means that the salary affords, you get yourself into a position where he's trying to figure out how to get Super Bowl tickets to fly. Well, you don't make enough money to be able to be paying to go into something where the tickets cost $10,000. You don't, if you can't afford a new deck, don't get one. But psychologically, be okay with the fact that you need to live within your means, and you need to have expectations that match that.
How do you do that? How do you psychologically get yourself there?
Well, I live in the hood, so it's not really hard. But my means are, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm just saying. I guess if you live around a bunch of people that got a lot of money, they might feel some kind of peer pressure. How about don't move into the neighborhoods with folks that you can't afford to live around because you're gonna feel some peer pressure. But in 16th and Lehigh, it's not a whole lot of peer pressure to me to live outside of my means. I live in regular Philly with regular folk, so I don't have it. And so if I'm not able to afford something, there's not a lot of shame in that because I'm living with people who can't afford stuff.
Yeah, I'm not talking about shame. I just mean
No, I'm
not
serious
being
because
corruptible.
people get corrupted because they are pursuing the shiny things in life. And then they lack the ability to get those things through the normal means. And because if you're not pursuing those things to begin with, there's an assumption that all of us wake up in the morning wanting to pursue all these things that you don't have. But if you got enough money legally to afford the things that you want, then there isn't much temptation to go out there and figure out anything else out. So for me, I can afford to live at 16th and Lehigh, and I can afford to pay my bills, and I can afford to do the things I want. And so I don't feel a sense of pressure, and I really don't even care that much about fancy clothes. My wife made me buy some better stuff because she knew I was coming on the stage to be with y'all. But the reality is, I don't desire those things, and therefore there isn't much temptation for me to have them.
Thank you.
So I want to keep the conversation on money. There's a saying that the person who pays the piper calls the tune. And can you tell us who your biggest donors are and why?
Yeah, so my biggest donors are, I've raised more money through my connections to organized labor than any other place. I've been endorsed by almost every union, not quite. There's a couple we're still working on. And the men and women of organized labor exist to level the playing field, so that regular people who go to work every day, who individually don't have the power to stand up to the big corporate interests, can have the power to collectively to do that. And so I'm proud that the men and women of organized labor, through their leadership, have invested in my campaigns, and I'm happy to do that. Look, I don't have I don't have any out-of-state organization like the Democratic Socialists of America with a bunch of New York money coming and dropping it off, talking about I'm only standing up for working people, when all the people that put that money come from an out-of-state organization. I also don't have a big corporate-funded super PAC doing it, although I hope organized labor does something in that space as well. Obviously, we're not allowed to talk to super PACs. But fundamentally, folk know who's supporting me. It's the men and women of organized labor. I've been endorsed by all these PACs, by these unions. Every union's got a union PAC, and we're going to list, and I hope they've all maxed out already. If they haven't, we will be calling and asking you to continue to do that. But no, unabashedly, I am a labor-backed candidate, and that's where most of my money comes from.
Thank you.
A couple minutes left, Senator Street. The 3rd Congressional District is like Democratic, like the most in the country. 40D rating from the Cook Political Report. Some might suggest that this fosters extremity, that it's going to be left governance, whoever holds this seat, and then the extreme right will fight, and there's no one in the middle to agree. What do you think about that?
Well, look, I have one of the most Democratic Senate seats in the country as well. But you also got to recognize that the people that live in that state Senate seat and the people who live in this congressional seat have needs that need to be met. And so there are a lot of people in this district that needed health care. So I had no problem working with people to make sure that we passed the Pennsylvania Healthcare Exchange. And I had to work on both sides of the aisle to get that done. And so we got Pennsylvania's own Obamacare. People needed money for violence prevention. So I had no problem working, and we had to cut a deal to get them Sunday hunting so we could get violence prevention money to make sure that we got money to bring down the rates of violence. With money we have the issues around felony murder. There are issues that we are prepared to work with folks to deliver resources because people need them. But at the same time, when Donald Trump was trying to take our rights to vote away, and they needed people to sue him, I was in a position, because my constituents would back me, that I was the lead plaintiff on almost every lawsuit that we had against him. I sued him over a dozen times. I beat him every time in court. And so you have to understand when it's time to fight. You have to be prepared to fight. And I've taken the Trump administration to court, and I've beaten them consistently. But on the other hand, you got to understand when your folks have needs, you got to do that too. So this is a seat that affords you an opportunity to be around to get some stuff done. But understand this, the people of the district expect us to do just that.
Pennsylvania State Senator Sharif Street. Don't go anywhere, please. And the other candidates, if they could join us back up here at the podium. And please give a hand to my colleagues here, Maggy Wilkinson and Marcel Pratt. Dr. Stanford and Representative Rabb, please make yourself comfortable. We have 2 seats here for you, and we have some questions from the audience. We'll start with the person who sits next to me, which would be Representative Rabb. You're the lucky winner. Representative, what is the one thing you'd admire about your fellow candidates?
Oh, that's easy. All right. Oh, that's easy. I love that they're highly competent people in this race. When my cousin told me about Dr. Stanford and what she was doing on the ground during the pandemic, I went to see for myself, and I amplified the work she was doing by sharing people, letting people know and to come out. And her leadership was critical in a very important time in our fighting the good fight during great adversity. So that's absolutely something I can say without question for Dr. Stanford. Senator Street and I play well together. Whether it's on cannabis reform. He always invites me on panels to nerd out about cannabis policy, criminal legal reform, sustainable agriculture. Senator Street is a fellow nerd. And we don't have enough nerds in public office, and I commend you for being a stalwart nerd.
Dr. Stanford, same question.
I would say, Senator Street, you are a family man. And I see how your family rallies around you. And even people who are not blood, and sometimes will say to me, Doc, I love you, but he's gonna help my man out with fill in the blank, which is, different, you know what I'm talking about. And that's just respect. I would say for Rep. Rabb, your ability to galvanize people. That's what I would say. Your ability to galvanize. Your base is strong. They are loyal. If you say the sky is purple, they're like, yeah, it's purple. And so that's what I would say. Yeah.
Senator Street.
For Rev, I agree. We do play well in the sandbox. We've worked on a lot of issues together. We've been on panels for cannabis together. We worked on criminal justice reform together, and we've been all over the state at a bunch of events, standing up for people. So I appreciate his value proposition, And we're a lot of times when we're doing this stuff, it's really tense, and we're really talking about like we're nerding out on really intense issues. And he has a sense of humor that actually allows people to get through heavy issues. And I think it's important because I've been in a lot of foxholes. We're dealing with heavy stuff and it's really detailed, but his sense of humor allows us all to move. Even in this process, it's allowed us to move forward, and I think that's something that's needed, and we don't have enough of. You can be serious. You can be serious about the work, but still have a certain amount of levity, and I appreciate that Chris has that, and I thank him for that. Look, I appreciate Dr. Stanford's look. She stepped up during COVID, and it was remarkable. I'm honored to have been able to come up with some resources to help in that regard. But as she points out, there were not a lot of doctors that were prepared to do that work in our community. I live just a few blocks away from the Dr. Stanford Center. And she's right. There were, in the midst of COVID, there was a measure of confusion about a disease, and she had a level of medical expertise that she brought to bear that was critically important at a time when people needed it. And I'm very grateful for her leadership in that space.
That was kind of nice, all that. Wasn't that? Thank you for your question. All these are really great questions. I've looked at all of them. This is a quick one for all of you. Who is your political hero? Right down the line.
Sorry, it's okay. My grandmother, Madeline Wheeler Murphy. She was the one who inspired me. She was the one who said, even flushing the toilet is a political act. And I didn't know what she meant. And I realized that government and politicians determine what infrastructure there is and who gets indoor plumbing and who doesn't. And so, yeah, she always my hero.
Wow. I'm going to say Shirley Chisholm. And when I was in college at Penn State, she came and was an invited lecturer. Now I'm going to find that picture and post it. And I was so proud because she was the first in so many regards. But what I remember most was that she was a chocolate woman. And back then, you didn't see a lot of people who looked like me. And, you know, her hair wasn't perfect. She had the diastasis or the gap between her teeth, but she was proud and she stood strong and she was smart and she was intelligent and she was fearless. So that's my person.
For me, it would be former Congressman Lucian Blackwell. I came from a family of activists, and my dad, my uncle, where we were fight the power, burn it all down, fight everybody. And my dad gets elected, and my uncle gets elected, and Congressman Blackwell, he's Councilman Blackwell at the time, he's like, you represent people now. They need things. You have to actually get things done. That when you were before, you were complaining to get other people to get things done. It's your job to get things done. And my dad was like, "We're getting things. No. What are you going to do for the people they call you?" I mean, you know, he stuttered a little bit. What you going to do? What are you going to do for those people? What are you going to do for them? And he said, you need to, and he introduced us to talking organized labor, and he introduced us to the fact that we had to work with people that we had been yelling at, and he understood the value of getting things done. It was Lucian Blackwell, along with then Councilwoman Janie Black, was just his wife was a staffer at the time. They were talking about actually making sure that we fed homeless people and that you had policies to address with them. They made sure that we actually got legislative done. And my dad went on to be known for being very effective. But in the beginning, we were just wanting to burn it all down. It was Lucian Blackwell that introduced the idea that we had to deliver for people. And I will always be grateful for him for that.
Candidates, there are 435 members of the House. There are some true legislators, and there are some characters. What will you bring to Congress that isn't there now?
Well, go ahead. I was just saying, what's the question again, Rick? You said legislators?
There are all these people there now. Why you? What will you bring to Congress that would be new?
So I think outside the box. For me, I start with what's the problem and bring all the subject matter experts for what I don't know to find a solution. And I'm relentless until we find it. Even if we disagree, we can find some commonalities. What I bring also is a level of expertise, okay, I have to say it, in healthcare, but not just grassroots, also academic, also at the federal level. And as the regional director, it wasn't just Philly, it was the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Maryland, DC, Delaware, Virginia, West Virginia. And it was my job to bring forth the policy that led to the legislation and disseminate it for whatever was passed. So that was 988 during my time. It was the extension of the maternal health coverage up to a year because of the high morbidity and mortality of women in childbirth. And it was the reduction of prescription drugs and hearing aids. And so what I bring different is federal experience, federal leadership experience, the ability to come up with a plan when there is no plan, be effective and productive in it. And I'm also a small business owner that knows how to balance a budget and make payroll every 2 weeks. And then the last part is it's a lived experience. And so it's not just being knowledgeable, but being close to the pain for the policy that I bring forth. So it's not abstract for me. It's what I've lived and experienced, and I will bring that forth as I bring forth the legislation and leadership and community earmark funds back to the 3rd Congressional District.
The other candidates like to respond? Answer the question? I have more.
So, my great grandfather was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And there are probably other members of Congress who descend from fancy people like that. But that's not a point of pride for me, because that family was one of the biggest human traffickers in North America. They owned thousands of black people. And one of those folks was my great-grandmother, Christiana, who was an abolitionist in Brooklyn. And so I embody the beauty and the ugliness of our nation. And so I don't come from a place of saying, oh, well, my people have been in power for all these years and I naturally exude, excellence and so forth. No, I represent the inherent struggle and complexity of a nation that was born on stolen labor and stolen land. And I can hold two truths at the same time, that this is a very, very troubled nation, and this is a nation that has not yet fulfilled the promise of greatness because it has never truly invested in goodness. And in my role as one of 435, my commitment to the people of the 3rd Congressional District of Pennsylvania and society at large is to build shared prosperity and collective liberation for all, knowing that troubled history.
Senator Street, how would you be a difference maker? What would you bring that is different?
So I think one of the things I bring that's different is each and every day I go back home to a low-income community. I go back to the ghetto. I go back to the hood. And I don't think there are a whole lot of members of Congress that do that. And at the same time, if there are, I've had the duality in life of I was good academically, so I always went to good schools. And I have interacted with probably some of the more well-to-do folks. I went to Morehouse College, studied finance and accounting, which is probably some of the most well-to-do African-American families in the country. I went to Penn Law School and interacted and worked in corporate. And even when I was working at in the corporate legal field, I always went back home to the hood. So the duality of understanding what it's like and having on a day-to-day basis constant experiences with some of the most affluent people who exist in the country, and at the same time living with the poorest people in the country is real. For me, I remember talking to my fellow students at Penn who were doing really well, but the people who swept up the law school lived in my neighborhood and where I was going home. The people who were the janitorial staff lived there, and one of the folks like that was a guy who Mike, who worked at the front desk, and he was a security guard, and he was talking about he wanted to be he wanted to be a lawyer. I gave him my law books because I said you could do this. He ultimately became a lawyer and is now a judge of the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas. The difference was I was able to see in him his potential because I lived in the neighborhood. I saw his full humanity. And at the same time, I was able to show him that he could belong there because he knew I was from the neighborhood. And I think going to Congress as a person who didn't just come from the hood, but who is still a part of it every day will be different. And at the same time, being able to connect with and recognize people who come from a much greater background, who have a much greater economic capacity is also somewhat unique.
Final question for the candidates. How well do you get along with your colleagues? Would they call you a team player?
Depends on the people. Some people I'm not really trying to play with, you know? And I take pride in that. Like, if you're part of the problem and you can't function in good faith, I'm gonna work around you. But the good news is, if you meet people where they are in good faith, you can find ways to connect, and that has been my track record. For the folks who have the greatest criticisms of me not playing well with others, because they have not wanted to be part of the solution. And I don't have a lot of time for those people.
Dr. Stanford?
A team player all day. I am collaborative in nature. I do not claim to know everything. You know, in the operating room as a surgeon, I can have great hands, but if I don't have a nurse, if I don't have an assistant, if I don't have the anesthesiologist, if I don't have the medical student, if I don't have the person that brings the bed, that warms the blankets, I can't do my job. And so I value everyone on the team. I also value the diversity in the teams that I bring together because I can see things through the lenses of the people that I surround myself with. And so my leadership is very much servant-oriented, but it's also collaborative because ultimately you can go further when you work together. And so everyone on my team knows, even when people are not performing well and I have to be the boss and make choices, I say, okay, we need to set this person up to win. We're not going to start collecting, well, they did this, put this in their file, put this in there. Well, maybe we have them in the wrong role. If we brought them in here and we hired them and they're not performing, then that's on us to educate them, or it's on us to find their strength, because everyone has a strength. So I would say that people say, yes, I'm a good person to get along with. I'm a bridge builder.
Senator Street?
Yes, I think I'm a team player. Look, and we're working in the General Assembly. Look, the rule of thumb is in order to get something done, it's a numbers game. It's 102, 26, and the governor signs it. 102 members of the House, 26 senators, and the governor signs it. Look, I've been able to work with collaboratively with progressive folks with whom I share value propositions. Like Rep. Rabb, he has been a team player with me about others. I mean, that's true. But I've also been able to be a team player with much more conservative people with whom I often don't agree with. In order to get funding for drug and alcohol programs, I worked with Senator Michelle Brooks, who on many issues, her positions would be deeply offensive to most people in this room and have been that so to me. But on that issue, there was an opioid addiction crisis both in her areas in Crawford, and we had similar issues going on in the city of Philadelphia. We were able to find the common ground to move things forward on that issue. And so, yes, I recognize the value of working with people across teams, and I can do it when I get to be the head of the team, like when I was chair of the party, or in moments when I have to be a part of a team led by one of my colleagues. Like if we're trying to get budget issues done and I'm working with a team that's led by Senator Hughes, or we're trying to get justice reinvestment done and it's a team on an issue led by Senator Williams or other people. So I both know how to lead the team and also know how to be a part of the team led by someone else. I can do both things.
As Larry Pratt returns to the stage, I would like to thank all of you for coming. Thank you for being a part of this process. And please give a hand to Representative Chris Rabb, Dr. Ayla Stanford, and Senator Sharif Street.
Thank you all. Let's hear it again for these candidates. What a great night for civics in Philadelphia. And thank you all for coming.